Hello everyone, and welcome to the fosterer training session that we're delivering today. And today's presentation will be delivered by the Exeter Community team. So my name's Kate Lewis and I am the Canine Assisted Services Operations Manager, and I'll let the other members of the team introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Glenda. I'm the Dog Wellbeing Specialist for the team.
Hi, I'm Donna Chislett and I'm a Dog Wellbeing Technician in the Exeter team.
Hi, I'm Susie Lewington and I'm a Guide Dog Mobility Specialist in the Exeter team.
And I'm Jo Nash and I'm the Training and Behaviour Advisor in the Exeter team too.
Thanks very much, guys, and thanks to everybody that's joining us for this recorded session today as well. So team, you can now switch your cameras off until it's your time to do your section of the presentation. So to start with, we will just go through what the learning outcomes of today's sessions are. So Jo, can you go on to the next slide for me, please? Thank you very much. So the learning outcomes today are we're going to go through some of the expectations of a guide dog, which includes how dogs learn, their feeding, spending, settling in your new house guest, and then we'll move on to travel, free running, the equipment that will be provided to you, and a lesson on dog communication too. But first, before we get to all of that good stuff, there are some important laws and legalities that we need you to be aware of when you foster a dog for us. And we hope that you've had a chance to look through these. They are in the volunteer handbook for some more information. But as they're so vital and we really need to make sure that everyone's up to date, we'll start with a fun dog law quiz. So if we were doing this as a live session today, we would be doing this interactively. However, with this recorded version, I'll ask for some audience participation from my colleagues instead. So could move on, please, Jo. So there's two pictures on the screen. Both of them show a person who is in a car, and in one of them, the dog is on the front seat, and the other, the dog is kind of in the back, but putting its head through, and the driver's directly looking at the dog. So we want to know, in this picture, which law or laws are being broken here? So I'll give you the options, which are A, the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991, B, the Road Traffic Act of 1988, C, the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014, or D, the Control of Dogs Order 1992.
I would say D.
I was thinking road traffic, because it's to do with cars.
I was thinking more D, with control of dogs.
Yeah.
Sure. So we'll go on to specifically what D does cover, but the correct answer in this case was B, so well done to Susie, which is the Road Traffic Act. And the Road Traffic Act states that animals are not to be a nuisance or distract the driver during a journey. So on to our next one. Here we have a news headline which says, dog owners who fail to pick up waste risk £1,000 fine under a new order. So which order is it that is in this headline? So is it A, the Clean Neighbourhoods and Environment Act 2005, B, the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014, C, Control of Dogs Order 1992, or D, the Animal Welfare Act of 2006?
I think it's C, Control of Dogs Order.
Oh, popular one today. Anybody
I
else?
think it's A, because it's about clean neighbourhoods and environment, so maybe about being clean around the place.
And that is correct, Donna. The correct answer is A. So we will come on to this Control of Dogs Act, I promise. But for now, the Clean Neighbourhoods and Environment Act of 2005 states that by law, you have to pick up after your dog. The only exception to that is a qualified guide dog only, so not a training dog, but a fully qualified guide dog. Although many of our guide dog owners would still see this as their responsibility. So on to the next slide, please, Jo. So here we have two pictures. One shows a German Shepherd that is surrounded by cockles and chickens, and the other is a dog that is quite clearly chasing some sheep. So what laws do we think have been broken in these two pictures? So our old favourite, the Control of Dogs Order 1992, B, the Animal Welfare Act of 2006, C, Protection of Livestock Act of 1953, or D, the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991.
I think it could be A or C.
I was thinking that, Glenda.
Yeah, I would agree.
I definitely thought C, protection of livestock, being as there's livestock in the picture.
Sure. Yes. I mean, the answer here for this question is C. I can kind of see how you'd get an A from it. So when we do get onto that one, we will discuss why the reasons might be in these pictures. But for the purpose of the livestock being in these pictures, that yes, the correct answer there is C. So the Protection of Livestock Act of 1953 states that livestock must be protected, and a farmer does have the right to shoot a dog if necessary to protect that livestock. So final one. So there's a lot going on in this picture really. So there's three dogs in this picture that I think you'll probably agree some are looking a little malnourished. There's one that's clearly got its mouth open, which could either be in a bark or a growl. They're on a crossing, so kind of in the road as well. So which laws do we think have been broken in this picture? So A, the Animal Welfare Act of 2006, B, Control of Dogs Order 1992, C, Road Traffic Act of 1988, D, the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991, or E, the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act of 2014.
I'd say definitely A, the Animal Welfare Act, because of their condition.
I'd say definitely B as well.
Yeah, they've got no collars or leads on, have they?
No, nothing. The cars whizzing everywhere and they're clearly out of control.
So I was thinking Road Traffic Act because they're on the road.
And on low lead, yeah, actually.
And that one's barking as well, so possibly the Dangerous Dogs Act.
Looks a little bit vicious.
I'd feel threatened by it.
Yep.
Thanks very much. You are all correct. So the answer in this one is in fact all of them. So as Donna from Dog Welfare, who I would absolutely have expected to get that question, that the Animal Welfare Act is indeed broken here because of the condition of the dogs. So as we can see there, all of those dogs, none of them look in optimum condition. None of the conditions of the Animal Welfare Act have been met for those dogs. B, so I did promise to get onto the Control of Dogs Order 1992. It was touched upon, but the reason why it's been broken is because that act states that dogs have to have a collar on with their name or owner and an address inscribed on either the collar or the plate or the stroke badge that's attached to it. Please note as well that a phone number isn't actually mandatory by law. However, it is generally advised to have a phone number, obviously, in case of the instance that the dog was lost. So, see, as we've been through the Road Traffic Act, definitely that, as we said previously, that the dog is not to be a distraction to drivers, but on top of that, that the dog has to be on a lead when it's near a road. The Dangerous Dogs Act also states that it is a criminal offence for a dog to be dangerously out of control in public and to private. And in addition, it's an offence not only to cause injury, but the perception that the dog might cause injury, which would include behaviours seen such as barking, jumping up, chasing, which, as we said, the dog in this picture that does look like it is barking would fall under that act. The Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act. So Joe touched upon it, but the reason that this act has been broken here is because it states that an attack on assistance dog is an aggravated offence, and the possible consequences of that can be a prison sentence to the owner of the dog. So I think that we'd agree with the behaviours that can be seen in this picture. It could result in a attack on an assistance dog here, which is why that law would be broken. So the take-home message from the dog law quiz is that please do keep these laws in mind, that some of them that they are going to apply to you, and they are just things that you're going to need to be aware of when you have one of our dogs within your care. So now moving on to the next stage of the presentation, so the training section itself. So to start with, we just thought we'd give an overview so that you can see where your role as a volunteer fosterer fits into the life and times of a guide dog. So guide dogs have a significant number of stages in their careers. So it's first of all to say that all of our dogs are bred by us at our national centre, which is in Leamington. So the studs and the bitches mate with their chosen partners, which is chosen by our breeding specialists, and they'll look to breed for temperament, health and genetic diversity. The brood bitches are boarded with volunteers until they give birth. So after that birth, when the pups reach around 7 weeks old, they'll go to a puppy raiser where they will spend the first 12 to 14 months of their lives. And during that phase, they will go through our puppy raising for excellent partnerships, or PrEP, as its acronym is given. And the aim of that is that the pups are socialised and they learn basic behaviours such as sit, down, recall, a spending routine. Just for information, the puppy raising used to be called puppy walking. So if you ever refer to that, if ever hear it's been referred to as that terminology, it's the same thing. So when the dog reaches that 12 to 14 months, that it will enter training, which, as you know, for many of our volunteer fosterers, that is the stage that we will ask you to foster our dogs for us. So when they come into us during the days, they will go through our STEP training programme, which is standardised training for excellence partnerships. And this is the dog's formal training period. So it's approximately 17 to 20 weeks long, and it teaches all guiding behaviours that are focused on using positive, reward-based methods, which we'll tell you a little bit more about in a bit, and force-free handling. So during the programme, that the dogs will be taught all the basics, as well as things like avoiding obstacles, stopping at curbs, finding objectives such as chairs and crossing boxes. And in the later stage of training, they'll be matched to someone who we have on what's called our ready to train list. So that's someone that we have identified would benefit from having a guide dog for their independence and their mobility. And in the final 4 weeks of their training, that will look to prepare that dog for the individual's needs. So with that 17 to 20 week period, so as a fosterer for us, that we may on occasions ask you to have the dog for the duration of that 17 to 20 week period, but sometimes we might also move dogs around a little bit. And that's totally normal, and we'll explain a little bit more why of some of the reasons for that later. So once the dog has gone through its training and has been matched to the person, they'll then have an intensive course together, and that period of time we call class. So during that time, the guide dog owner will learn how to work with their guide dog in a variety of situations. And once they've qualified, they'll receive aftercare from us for the duration of their life. So we'll check on the work of the partnership, the dog's health, and anything else that's needed by the partnership. If during the STEP training that we identify that the dog might not be suited to the guiding role, then we may look for alternative careers for the dog instead. So this would be through our Buddy Dog service. So our Buddy Dog service is a service that is for children. So the dog will not be in a guiding role, but instead will provide companionship, promote confidence and well-being for a child that has sight loss. So at around 9 or 10 years old, as long as the dog's still healthy and we haven't already retired the dog, that we'll look to retire the dog at around that stage. So this means that if the owner wants to and they can provide them for the needs of the dog, that they might be able to keep it. If they can't, then it might be that the dog is rehomed, and quite often that rehome might be either to back to the puppy raiser where the dog started their career, or it could be to a nominated home, which could be a family friend or a well-vetted person that's looking to rehome one of our dogs as well. So moving on, so I'm going to pass over to Jo, please, for the next section on how our dogs learn.
Okay, so I'll try and keep it user friendly. This section is just going to kind of have a gentle explore, and feel free, if this is something that of interest to you, to speak to us more at a later date. But basically, just want to give you some information about how our dogs learn, and particularly as they're going to be spending a lot of time with you. When you think of the bulk of their time is probably spent with you, and so we want to give you a bit of information about how our dogs learn new behaviours, and how these behaviours are maintained, and you may be able to give us some really useful insight if we're working through particular challenges with our dogs as well. So we call them the ABCs. You might hear us talk about these in relation to dogs and their behaviour. So all animals learn through the consequences of their behaviour. So consequences really drive what an animal, including ourselves, will do. So our ABC basically means A is our antecedent. So that is anything that's happening within the environment, within maybe something the trainer's doing. It's something that happens before a behaviour happens. So in this example, it's the human saying sit. The behaviour is the behaviour itself. So when a dog sits, hopefully we can all agree what that looks like is the dog's bottom hits the floor. And consequence is C. So C means consequence, and basically what that means, what happens after the dog shows that behaviour. So when the dog sits, they receive a food reward. So the consequences the dog receives for their behaviour can be pleasant things, i.e. the food reward in this example, or it can be unpleasant things which will affect their future behaviour. So if we were going to use it again in this example, if the unpleasant thing was maybe the dog sits on something uncomfortable and feels pain when it sits, it's less likely that dog will sit because the consequence is unpleasant. So if the consequence to the behaviour is positive, like a biscuit, then that is more likely to happen again. And we will talk about that, the behaviour has been reinforced. So reinforcement basically means something that is given or happens to the dog which makes the behaviour likely to happen again in the future. In the other example where I said maybe the dog feels pain, it's sat on something uncomfortable. If something unpleasant happens in response to the behaviour is likely to be reduced in the future. And we call this, in pure behaviour science, we call this punished. So punishment basically means that something like a behaviour is reduced. So we're not using the connotations that we might all feel around that term punishment. We often think of that as having very negative connotations. We're literally using it as punishment reduces a behaviour, reinforcement increases a behaviour. So from a human example, if a child gets burnt for putting their hand near a fire, they are unlikely to repeat that behaviour in the future. So because it's a reduction, we're likely to say the behaviour has been punished. With a dog, a puppy mouths a human's hand during play and the human walks away. The puppy is less likely to mouth the human in the future because it actually wants to continue the play. However, we do want to avoid using punishment, as we can get side effects when we rely on punishment at changing a dog's behaviour. And these can be things like feelings of fear, feelings of frustration, and both these feelings can affect the human-animal bond and can have a negative impact on the animal's welfare. So they really do need to be used with care. And something actually to just bear in mind is that punishment is to a dog is anything they don't like. So we might automatically think about the physical aspects of punishment, so potentially hitting, using things that cause pain. But for some dogs, punishment can be a very stern tone of voice. They might find that incredibly aversive. For some dogs, it can be touch. Not every dog likes to be touched in certain areas in certain ways. So it's observing your dog and what is your dog telling you about that particular consequence. So here at Guide Dogs, we are relying on positive reinforcement training as a way to train our dogs. It's a science-based training method. So there's lots and lots of research out there that tells us this is the best training method we can use in terms of ethics, welfare, well-being of the dog, and success. So it focuses on rewarding the desirable behaviours so that they will actually occur more in the future. So back to that consequence, by using reinforcement and reward, behaviours are more likely to happen. So it teaches animals what we want them to do rather than punishing for the behaviours we don't want. So another key aspect of punishment is it doesn't really therefore then instruct the dog instruct the dog as to what we would like it to do instead, or provide information, as opposed to us actually taking that time to really allow that animal to understand what are the behaviours we would like. So if we develop the correct desired behaviours, often what you do find is the stuff you don't want goes away. So they reduce dramatically, because actually the animals have learned there are more reinforcing behaviours they can do. So we do use food as the main reinforcer for positive reinforcement training. That is because it's what we would call a primary reinforcer, which means they need food. Everybody needs food to survive, whether you're a dog, whether you're a giraffe, whether you're a human, and no learning needs to take place to say that food is reinforcing. Plus it's easy for us to use. We can use, which you'll find out later on in the presentation, the dog's own food in our training. So it's breakfast and it's dinner. And I think you will all agree most of our dogs really enjoy food, and I know you're probably all thinking Labradors as well on that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to explore is how dog training has changed dramatically over the years, really. So studies in the 1940s were carried out on captive wolves, and they revealed a really rigid hierarchy where there were frequent competitions for resources, and the alpha wolf usually won these competitions. As dogs are from the same family as wolves, a lot of trainers then believed that in order to train our dogs, we needed to treat them as if we were the alpha. However, the studies were carried out on unrelated animals, unrelated wolves, so not a natural wolf pack, and they were living in these captive environments, so restricted by space, which affected their normal behaviour. Whereas actually recent studies show that wolves living in family groups, there's actually rarely, if at all, competition for resources, and it's usually the young or weaker wolves which eat first rather than the breeding pair. Dogs are also really far removed from wolves. We share 99% of our DNA with orangutans, but would we actually say we are the same? So we've learned over the years that dogs are not actually wolves. So this idea of us needing to behave like the alpha wolf with our dogs. And you may have heard things like if the dog's getting on the furniture, it's actually trying to dominate, that we need to eat first, because that's what the alpha wolves would do. So that projects to the dogs that we're in charge. These are all common myths that even the gentleman that first developed this theory has now come along and said, actually, do you know what, I got it wrong. My observations were not correct because of the artificial nature of my observations. So dogs are not trying to dominate us. They are not trying to be alpha. So also, sorry, my brain went then. So the other thing to think about is, you know, we are not dogs. No, we're not dogs. So then their communication style is going to be very different as well on that. There is a really good book called Dominance, Fact or Fiction. So if this is something that's kind of made you think and want to learn more, that's a good starting point. Plus there'll be lots of things that you can search on the internet and we can guide you to that if you're keen to learn more.
Guide dogs.